I dedicated 15 years to this company, keeping my record spotless. Yet my wife filed a formal report accusing me of taking a $2 million bribe. They couldn't find a single cent of dirty money. Once my innocence was proven, my boss shook my hand, offering a formal apology. I stayed silent, turned around, and walked home. There, I gazed at my daughter's soft, innocent face. Suddenly, memories of my wife's cold indifference over the years rushed back, along with thoughts of her cousin, who was always lingering at our house. The next day, I took my daughter straight to the hospital. The moment the paternity test results were revealed, my entire body began to tremble. His hand was dry and warm, but I just stared at him without uttering a word. A document lay flat on the desk, stamped with official red ink and bold black text. Investigative conclusion regarding the $2 million bribery allegations against Zhao Yi. Ruling the whistleblower's report is unsubstantiated. 3 months, 92 agonizing days. I spent every waking moment trapped in a room smaller than 10 square meters. My 3 meals a day were delivered through a slot, and twice every single day, they subjected me to intense interrogations. They scrutinized the origin of every single deposit and the destination of every single expenditure. I repeated my story until I was hoarse. I told them I never took a dime. They seemed skeptical, yet strangely convinced. Today, the nightmare finally ended. Group leader Wang personally escorted me out of the building. Regarding your department, I've already cleared things up with Director Zhang. He mentioned holding a brief meeting to officially restore your reputation. I gave a simple nod. Go home and get some proper rest. Your wife, she's had a tough time too. I froze, locking eyes with him. Awkwardness crossed his face. Right, my wife, Zhou Rui. She played the hero of justice, sacrificing her family by filing that official report against her husband. Yes, me. She claimed there was a $2 million certificate of deposit hidden in our nightstand. When they pried it open, it was completely empty, nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's what I maintained. Looking them in the eye, I uttered 3 words. I'm innocent. Now my name is finally cleared. Group leader Wang patted my shoulder and walked away. I stood under the harsh sunlight, head swimming, when my phone vibrated. It was Director Zhang. Zhao Yi, where are you? I'm throwing you a welcome back dinner tonight to wash away the bad luck. No thanks, I replied, I just really want to go home. There was a brief silence. Fair enough. Your wife must be anxiously waiting for you. Rest easy, I'll handle everything regarding your work. I hung up and headed home. At the office where I had never made a mistake in 15 years, I had become the hottest gossip. And the home I'd lived in for 12 years because of all this, it felt like I could never truly return. I hailed a cab and blurted out my address. As the car moved, the trees outside blurred in a rapid, rhythmic rush. My mind was completely blank until the taxi finally pulled up downstairs. I paid, stepped out, and walked slowly into the hallway. I slid my key into the lock. The door creaked open. Mommy, higher, go even higher. I changed my shoes and stepped inside. Zhou Rui was lifting a model airplane, playfully teasing our daughter, Annan. Annan sat perched on the sofa, kicking her tiny legs and giggling uncontrollably. She saw me and froze. Daddy, her voice was barely a whisper, laced with a heartbreaking sense of timidity. 3 months, and she's already become a stranger. Zhou Rui set the model down and stood up slowly. You're finally back. I stared intently at her, noticing she'd grown gaunt, as if she were the victim, bearing some monumental grievance. I gave a cold, short response, walked to the sofa, and sank in. Annan peeked from behind her mother, stealing glances at me. That facet was so rosy and plump, absolutely adorable. I used to love pinching those cheeks. But now, staring at that same face, my heart feels like a block of ice. Have some water. A cup was pushed toward me. I didn't reach for it. When did you find out? This morning, group leader Wang told me. The room was suffocatingly quiet. The TV flickered, but the volume was muted. A fruit platter sat on the table, the grapes looking exceptionally fresh. Suddenly, a memory flashed through my mind. The day they hauled me away. It was a Wednesday. That afternoon, my colleague and cousin, Sun Peng, said he'd come for dinner. He was my senior in college, and we both worked in the same system. Our parents were old acquaintances, so our families were close. That's why Zhou Rui called him cousin. He was a bachelor who loved hanging around and mooching meals at my place. After I was taken, did he ever stop by? Has Sun Peng been around lately? Zhou Rui's body stiffened. It was subtle, but I caught it. No, of course not. With the mess you were in, how could he have the nerve to show up? Her eyes darted around, avoiding mine. I said nothing, merely snatching the remote to turn off the TV. I stood up. I'm exhausted, going to lie down. I headed to the bedroom. Dinner's ready, aren't you eating? No, I pushed the bedroom door open. The bed was neatly made, just as before. My professional books on the nightstand were replaced by glossy fashion magazines. I yanked open the drawer, finding my watch and wallet tossed inside. The secret compartment had been crudely pried open and ruined, leaving a jagged, hideous scar in the wood. I reached inside, feeling nothing but emptiness. Zhou Rui hovered by the doorway, looking flustered and lost. Zhao Yi, please let me explain. I was possessed, I wasn't thinking straight. I turned around slowly to face her. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face. The pressure was just too suffocating. I was terrified someone would call me, claiming you took the bribe and were bound to get caught. They said if I reported first, it would count as a merit. The pathetic lies spilling from her mouth didn't match any of the 100 scenarios I'd agonized over in custody. Her excuses were laughable. I watched her sob, but felt nothing. 15 years of marriage, and I thought I knew the woman sleeping beside me. Now I realized I never knew her. I stared at her, then looked past her shoulder at our daughter, Anan, peeking from the living room. Anan is 5 now, and she's the spitting image of Zhou Rui, especially those eyes. People said she was the perfect blend of us, her mother's eyes, her father's nose. I scrutinized Anan's tiny upturned nose. Did it really look like mine? A dark, venomous thought burrowed into my brain. Once it took root, I couldn't shake it. It felt like acid dissolving every last trace of warmth in my heart. I walked up to Zhou Rui as she sobbed. Stop crying, I said, my voice eerily calm. She looked up, stunned and confused. Tomorrow, we're taking Anan to the hospital. The hospital? Is she sick? She sounded panicked. She's not sick, I replied. We're just going for tests. I jolted awake at 6 the following morning. My wife was still fast asleep beside me, her brows furrowed deeply as if trapped in a nightmare. I watched her in silence. Before getting up to wash, the man in the mirror had wasted away, looking skeletal, like a hollow shell with foreign eyes. I shaved off my ragged beard, changed clothes. At 7 sharp, I rapped on Annan's door. Annan, it's time, silence. I pushed the door open without hesitation, seeing only the crown of her head peeked from under the sheets. I nudged her awake. She rubbed her tired eyes, fear flickering the moment she saw me. Daddy? Yeah, Daddy is taking you out for some fun. Where are we going? To a place where they need a little blood sample. Anan's face went completely pale. I don't want a blood test. I'm scared it'll hurt. She started crying. Thrashing on the bed, she threw a desperate tantrum. The noise jolted Zhou Rui awake. She stormed into the room like a whirlwind. Zhao Yi, what do you think you're doing? Have you lost your mind this early? She pulled Anan into a protective embrace, glaring at me. Anan is terrified of needles. Are you completely blind? What kind of test? Is so urgent it has to be today? Seeing her shield the child, she looked like a frantic hen guarding her nest. It has to be today. No exceptions. We stood in tense silence. Locked in a standoff, Annan glanced back and forth between us, staring at me, then her, before bursting into tears. I don't want to go to the hospital, Auntie. No needles. Zhou Rui held her tight, cooing softly to soothe her while stabbing me with daggers from her eyes. Exactly what kind of checkup is this? Just a routine physical. I've been gone so long, is it a crime? To care about my daughter's health? My logic was bulletproof. Zhou Rui bit her lip, unable to muster a rebuttal. I marched over and pried Annan from her grasp. Her wailing intensified instantly. Either I take her alone, or the 3 of us go together. Your choice. She glared with pure venom. After a few agonizing seconds, she finally backed down. Fine, I will go change. On the way to the hospital, the atmosphere inside the car was suffocating. I focused on driving while Zhou Rui and Annan sat in the back, her soft whimpers filling the silence. Zhou Rui spent the entire trip soothing her, whispering stories and promising the biggest ice cream once the checkup was over. I caught their reflection in the rearview mirror. It looked so heartwarming. A devoted mother and an adorable daughter. If that dark thought hadn't taken root yesterday, I probably would have softened. I would feel guilty for being so cold right after my return. But now, my heart was nothing but a frozen wasteland. Arriving at the hospital, I bypassed the usual desk and registered directly at the paternity testing center. The moment Zhou Rui saw those words, Forensic Identification Center, her face drained of all color. Zhao Yi, you, her voice trembled. I ignored her completely, dragging Annan toward the entrance. I don't want to go in. There are bad people in there. Annan shrieked. Zhou Rui lunged forward, grabbing my arm in a desperate grip. Zhao Yi, what is the meaning of this? Are you actually doubting Annan? Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to pierce bone. People in the hallway began to stop and stare. I shook off her hand with a violent shrug. Got a guilty conscience? I asked, my voice chillingly cold. She turned ghostly white. You bastard. How could you even think such a thing? Annan is your flesh and blood, your own biological daughter. Just because I blew the whistle on you, you're retaliating like this? To humiliate me and the child? I watched her performance intently. Every flicker of expression, every single tear she shed, was calculated. Calculated to absolute perfection. In the past, I would have surrendered immediately, but now the sight only filled me with pure revulsion. We will know for sure once the test is done. I gripped Annan's hand, refusing to waste another word on her. A nurse approached us. Are you here for the paternity test? Yes, both adult and child need blood drawn. The moment Annan heard the word blood, she began struggling violently. Zhou Rui lunged forward, trying to snatch her away. I used all my strength to keep Annan secured. Take mine first. The needle pierced deep into my arm. As the blood surged into the collection tube, I didn't feel a shred of pain. Next was Annan. 2 nurses held her down firmly as she screamed, sounding as if her very heart were being torn out. I hate you. Mommy, save me. Zhou Rui stood by, sobbing hysterically and hurling curses at me. Zhao Yi, you're a monster. You will regret this. I stared at the vial of blood, drawn from Annan's arm, feeling a hollow, numbing void in my chest. Once the samples were taken and paperwork was finalized, they told us the results would be ready in 7 business days. You can collect them in person, or we can mail them. I'll collect them myself. No need to mail them, I stated firmly, walking out. Zhou Rui cradled Annan, who was exhausted from crying. She glared at me like I was her mortal enemy. Zhao Yi, we are officially finished. We'll talk after the results are in. I walked ahead toward the parking lot while she trailed behind in silence. Once we returned home, she tucked Annan into rest before storming into the study. I was already at the computer, searching for divorce lawyers. You owe me a goddamn explanation. She slammed the door shut with a thunderous bang. Why are you doing this? She shrieked. Who has been whispering poison in your ear? Was it Sun Ping? Honestly, I was completely blindsided. That she was the first to bring up Sun Ping. It was an unexpected twist. I lifted my gaze to meet hers. You think it was him? If not him, then who? Who else even dares step foot in our home? He definitely told you something, didn't he? She looked like a drowning woman clutching at a straw. Zhao Yi, don't you dare believe a word he says. He is nothing but a treacherous snake. He's had it out for me for a long time. Watching her, the irony was almost comical. I was locked away for 92 days. My wife never spared a single thought for my suffering. And my cousin never even bothered to call. Now she's desperately trying to shift the blame onto him. And what exactly did he tell me? I played along, feeding into her narrative. She froze completely. He must have badmouthed me, claiming I'm having some scandalous affair with another man. She tested the waters with her question, but I remained silent. The color continued to drain from her face until she was ghostly. Zhao Yi, you can't think of me that way. We've been married for 15 years. You know what kind of person I am, don't you? I used to think I did, I said, shutting down the computer. Until the results are officially out, we're sleeping in separate rooms. I stood up and walked out of the study. You take the master bedroom, I'll take the guest room. She stood there rooted to the spot, her entire body trembling. What if, the results prove Annan is your daughter, Zhao Yi? How? Are you going to fix things then? I paused for a brief second. If she is, I'll get on my knees and beg for your forgiveness. I yanked open the guest room door and stepped inside. As the door clicked shut, I heard a guttural cry of pure despair erupt from outside. The 7-day countdown for the results began. Those 7 days felt like a goddamn century. Zhou Rui and I were existing under the same roof, yet we were nothing more than total strangers. Not a single word passed between us. A part-time cook handled our meals now, leaving the moment the food hit the table. Zhou Rui and I ate at different times. Even Annan seemed to sense the toxic tension. She stopped her usual noisy play and spent most of her time holed up in her room. Occasionally, when I passed by her door, I could overhear her whispering to her dolls, "Mommy and Daddy don't like me anymore." It felt like a jagged needle, stabbing my heart, but I didn't stop. I spent the bulk of those 7 days, locked in the guest room, scouring through every photo album from the last 12 years. I scrutinized every single image, frame by frame, watching Annan transform from a tiny infant in swaddling clothes into a strikingly beautiful young girl. I dug up my own childhood photos for a side-by-side comparison. Not a single feature matched. Then I looked at Zhou Rui's photos. Annan's eyes, mouth, and face shape were almost carbon copies of hers. Finally, I pulled out photos of Sun Ping. He was my senior from university, and we had dozens of group photos together. I placed Annan's picture right next to Sun Ping's face. That distinctively upturned nose, the exact way the corners of the mouth curled when smiling. They were identical. My heart began to sink into a dark, bottomless void. Falling into a bottomless void, my mind drifted to Sun Ping's visits. Every Friday night, he showed up with pricey fruit and trendy toys, claiming they were all gifts for our little Annan. Whenever he walked in, Zhou Rui would beam with joy, slaving over the stove to cook his favorite dishes. At the dinner table, The two of them always seemed to share an endless stream of conversation, from college memories to office gossip. They never stopped. If I tried to speak up, they would just brush me off with a quick, dismissive nod before diving right back into their private world. I told myself I was just being paranoid. They are cousins, after all. It was normal. Besides, I was buried in work, suffocating under pressure, and I never was a big talker. I thought it was good, Sun Peng kept her company. God, I was a pathetic fool. I remembered the day Anan was born, 5 years ago. I was pacing like crazy outside the delivery room, and Sun Peng was right there beside me. He claimed he was just passing by and heard Zhou Rui was in labor. When the nurse brought the baby out, I lunged forward, but Sun Peng was hovering right over my shoulder. Looking down at Anan in her swaddle, the look in his eyes was more intense than mine, the actual father. He congratulated me, calling her a gorgeous little girl, but he kept his eyes glued to Anan, never looking at me once. I even remember coming home early from work one day. I opened the door to find Sun Peng and Zhou Rui on the couch, leaning in incredibly close. She was crying, and his arm was wrapped around her, whispering. The moment they saw me, they jumped apart like they had been shocked. She sobbed, blaming a sad television drama, and he chimed in about how women get so emotional. And I fell for it like an idiot, believing them repeatedly. That $2 million corporate tip-off? Only those two could have cooked up such a venomous trap. They assumed that once I was locked behind bars, I would never walk free again. My home, my savings, and my reputation would fall right into their laps. They would not even face a messy divorce. A convict's wife, raising a fatherless child while leaning on her cousin. What a touching little story. I packed up every photo, grabbed my phone, and called a friend who works as a private investigator. I told him I needed him to dig into Sun Peng and my wife, Zhou Rui. I wanted their hotel check-in records from 5 years ago to today, and every single financial transaction. I wanted everything. He asked if I was absolutely sure, and I told him I was positive. He promised the data in 3 days. After hanging up, a bone-chilling cold washed over me. Day 7, the day of truth. I took a leave of absence, but as I prepared to walk out, Zhou Rui blocked the door. She was dressed and ready. She insisted on coming, screaming that she had to see the truth with her own eyes. She was acting completely hysterical, behaving as if she were certain the results would favor her. Maybe she thought playing the righteous victim could rewrite reality. I did not bother arguing. The drive to the testing center was silent. At the desk, I gave my name. The clerk handed over a thin manila envelope. It felt incredibly light, yet so heavy I almost dropped it. Zhou Rui lunged forward to grab it, but I dodged her easily. I held the envelope tight, my fingers turning ice cold as my hands shook completely out of control. Zhou Rui saw me trembling. She asked if I was scared, telling me to apologize before it was too late. I ignored her completely. With shaking hands, I ripped the envelope open. There was only one sheet of paper. I pulled it out, my eyes racing straight to the bottom conclusion. That single line of bold black text sliced through my mind like a hot blade. Based on the DNA analysis, Zhao Yi is excluded as the biological father of Zhao Anan. Excluded. 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 My brain erupted into a deafening roar, turning the world into a blinding white void. Complete silence fell. I could not hear Zhou Rui screeching, nor could I feel my own heartbeat. I stood there like a lifeless puppet, staring blankly at the paper. I have no clue how much time passed before her voice finally pierced through. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, yelling that it was impossible and that the report was fake. She stormed over to the counter, slamming her hands down and screaming at the staff. While she raged, I slowly and carefully folded the paper. I slid it back into the envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of my jacket, right against my chest. That spot should have been warm, but that paper made it feel cold as iron. I turned to look at Zhou Rui, who was still raving like a lunatic. I marched over and grabbed her arm. She begged me to believe her, claiming it was a mistake. I spoke only 3 words, my voice eerily calm. I dragged her toward the exit. She was no match for my strength, so I hauled her out of the hospital and shoved her into the passenger seat. I started the engine and hit the road. She kept sobbing, repeating that this was impossible, begging me to believe her, claiming I was the only man she had ever been with. But I knew about the $6,000 a month, first, last, and deposit, $36,000 up front. That was just a fraction of the information my investigator friend had sent. Every transaction was exposed. Her eyes filled with pure terror, staring at me as if I were a monster. She gasped, asking if I had investigated her. The moment she filed that false report against me, she should have known this day was coming. My phone vibrated with an encrypted file from my investigator friend. The subject read, "Everything you asked for." I picked up his call. He told me the files were enough to bury them both. Hotel logs, bank transfers, even screenshots of their private messages. He had even recovered deleted texts about framing me. I thanked him and hung up, pushing the screen in front of her face. To show the file name. She could not read the fine print. but she knew exactly what that title meant. Her resolve crumbled instantly. She began begging for forgiveness, crying that she was wrong. She pleaded with me to forgive her, to just go home and forget everything. She kept sobbing that we could not get divorced. She begged me to think of Annan, saying she could not grow up without a dad. I pulled the DNA report out, unfolded it, and shoved it right in front of her face. She stared down at the words, reading the line that excluded me as the father. Her crying stopped instantly, as if she had been choked. The car fell dead silent, a suffocating quiet. Right then, a black Audi pulled into the parking lot, stopping nearby. The driver's door opened, and Sun Peng stepped out of the vehicle. He was wearing casual clothes and carrying plastic grocery bags filled with fresh meat and vegetables. He was even humming a happy little tune as he walked. He locked his car and looked up at a window in Building 15. A warm, cozy smile was plastered on his face, staring directly at Unit 1103. Zhou Rui saw him too. She stared at him, those groceries, and that domestic bliss on his face. Finally, she buried her face in her hands, letting out a muffled, raw sob like a wounded animal. I drove back to the apartment in total silence. She huddled in her seat, staring blankly ahead. She sat there like a discarded, soulless ragdoll. Once we arrived, I parked the car in its usual spot, but she did not move until I said, "Get out." She trailed behind me into the building, into the elevator and out onto our floor. I turned the key and pushed the door open. Hearing us, Annan came running out of her room. "Mommy," she cried, lunging happily toward Zhou Rui. Zhou Rui went completely rigid. She instinctively flinched away from the hug, leaving the little girl grasping at thin air. Anan stood frozen, her wide eyes filling with deep confusion and hurt. She looked up at Zhou Rui, glanced tentatively at me, and then cautiously retreated into her room, clicking the door shut. I changed into my slippers, walked into the living room, and said, "Sit down." Zhou Rui moved like a broken marionette, dropping into the single armchair across from me. I did not bother heading to the study for my laptop. Instead, I booted up our living room smart TV. I mirrored my phone screen onto the giant display. The first slide was a DNA paternity report. Cold black ink on stark white paper. The conclusion was absolute and undeniable. Let us start here. This girl is not my daughter. Therefore, after the divorce, custody stays entirely with you. I won't be paying a single cent in child support, and there is absolutely no reason for visitation rights. Zhou Rui swayed as if she might collapse, but I remained completely expressionless. I clicked the remote to show the next slide. A spreadsheet filled the screen. It was the asset manifest I had prepared. Point 2. Assets. This 180 square meter apartment was bought entirely by me before we married. The deed bears only my name. It is strictly premarital property, and you have no claim to it. As for the car, that $500,000 vehicle is registered to me. It was bought using my premarital savings, making it solely my property. You won't get a single dime of the savings either. What's in our respective names stays there. I have already scrutinized your accounts. Aside from what your parents gave you, there is the money from Sun Ping. Those $320,000 he's been funneling to you since the year before last. You used your mother's bank card as a middleman, thinking I would never trace those funds. That proves your adultery, and I will submit every single transaction to the court. With every sentence, Zhou Rui's face drained of all color. I clicked to the next slide. A series of photographs began to cycle across the screen. Snapshots of her and Sun Ping at various hotel entrances and parking lots, locked in passionate embraces and kissing. The time and location for each were meticulously documented. Point 3. Grounds for divorce. Adultery and a long-term illicit relationship. The evidence here is absolutely ironclad and irrefutable, but the most critical point of all is that you, Zhou Rui, conspired with Sun Ping to commit malicious perjury. You framed me to put me behind bars just so you could seize every single asset I own. This is not just a simple affair, this is a serious criminal offense. Screenshots of their WeChat messages flashed onto the screen. My husband seems a bit suspicious lately. What should I do? Relax, there is nothing to fear. Just stick to the plan. Once he is locked away, you and Annan will finally be all mine. That $2 million deposit slip, will they really believe it? As long as you swear on your life, you saw it with your own eyes, they won't let him go. They won't let him off the hook. As long as he's detained, we've already won. Every word was a final nail in her coffin. Zhou Rui stared at the television, watching the hideous truth of her conspiracy with Sun Ping unfold. Finally, she completely snapped. It wasn't like that. He forced my hand. Sun Ping coerced me into everything. He swore he loved me, saying you would only treat me worse over time. He said he was the only one who could give me happiness. Reporting you was his scheme, too. He promised that if you were out of the picture, we'd be together forever. She desperately tried to wash her hands of the guilt. Even at this ultimate moment of truth, she was still putting on an act. I killed the power to the television. A deafening silence reclaimed the room. I stood up and grabbed 2 pre-printed documents from my study, flinging them onto the coffee table right before her eyes. One was a formal divorce settlement. The other, a voluntary waiver of all marital assets. Sign them, and we'll head to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow for a clean break. I won't pursue criminal charges for your perjury, and I'll even spare you a shred of dignity by letting you leave with absolutely nothing. That is my final offer. If you refuse, then every scrap of this evidence, including Anand's paternity report, will be copied 100 times. One goes to the court, and the rest go directly to your parents, to every single one of our relatives, and to both my office and Sun Ping's workplace. I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are, and what a scumbag Sun Ping is. By then, you won't just lose money and a house, you'll lose every last ounce of your dignity. Zhou Rui stared down at the papers on the table and slowly lifted her gaze to meet mine. Her eyes shifted from venomous spite to desperate pleading, until they finally faded into a hollow, dead gray. The next morning, I was up at dawn. Zhou Rui had not slept a wink. She was still sitting on the sofa like a lifeless, weathered statue. The 2 papers remained exactly where I'd left them, completely untouched. I didn't bother pressuring her. I washed up, changed into my suit, and got ready for the critical task ahead. Before stepping out, I shot her a final glance. You have 24 hours to think this over. I expect to see your signature by tomorrow morning. With that, I turned my back on the house. Instead of the office, I drove to a prestigious law firm, having spent 7 days scouting for the best, the city's most ruthless matrimonial lawyer, Zheng Changyi. I met with attorney Zheng exactly at our scheduled time. He was in his mid-40s, wearing gold-rimmed spectacles and radiating an aura of sharp professional competence. Greetings, Mr. Jiao, attorney Zheng said as we shook hands. We took our seats, tension thick in the air. I skipped the pleasantries and got straight to the point, sliding a USB drive from my briefcase across the mahogany desk. I am filing for divorce, I told him. Everything you need, every shred of proof, is on this drive. Jung nodded solemnly, plugging it into his computer. He opened the folders, scrolling through the contents one by one, from the DNA results, to the exhaustive asset manifest, down to the repulsive photos and incriminating chat logs. His expression shifted from professional calm to shock, finally hardening into a look of absolute gravity. He examined every detail with surgical precision, taking a full 30 minutes to absorb the betrayal. Once he finished, he removed his glasses, massaging the bridge of his nose. Mr. Zhao, I'll be blunt with you. I've handled hundreds of messy divorce cases, but this is the first time I've seen evidence this devastatingly complete. This cache of proof is more than enough to leave your wife defenseless in court. Her walking away with nothing isn't just likely, it's guaranteed. Then I'm placing my future in your hands. My demands are non-negotiable. First, I want this marriage dissolved immediately. Second, she doesn't touch a single red cent. Third, custody of Anand stays entirely with her. I refuse to have any further connection to that child. That won't be an issue. Legally, since she isn't your biological offspring, you have zero obligations toward her. Regarding assets, your wife is the party at major fault, especially with her calculated attempt to seize your fortune. Your premarital assets are bulletproof, and the division of communal property will swing heavily in your favor. We finalized the retainer fees and I signed my name on the contract. As I stood up to leave, one final burning question crossed my mind. Attorney Zheng, legally speaking, what can I do to that man? Jung paused, contemplating the weight of the situation. Simple adultery is notoriously difficult for the legal system to prosecute. However, if you have undeniable evidence proving he orchestrated and spearheaded the conspiracy to frame you, we can absolutely hold him criminally liable. But looking at these chat logs you provided, they were incredibly clever. Most of their setups were handled verbally. Building a bulletproof chain of evidence will be tough. Compared to criminal charges, targeting his job and his reputation might be a far more direct and devastating way to strike back. His advice matched my own dark thoughts exactly. I understand completely. Thank you for your help, Attorney Zhang. As I walked out of the law firm, I felt half the weight on my chest finally lift. My legal weapons for revenge were fully loaded. Now, it was time to open a second front. Standing on the curb, I pulled out my phone. I did not call Zhou Rou. Instead, I dialed Director Zheng from my office. He picked up almost instantly. Xiao Jiang, how are you holding up during your break? I appreciate the concern, Director Zheng. I have recovered quite well. When would be a good time? I am eager to return to my post as soon as possible. A brief, stunned silence followed, then a hearty chuckle. Excellent. You are welcome back any time. I have had Xiao Li keep your office reserved for you. It is being cleaned every single day. Thank you, Director. Regarding the meeting you mentioned to clear my name. Ah, yes. Should we keep it small, or... Actually, Director, I think we should make it a major event. I watched the endless stream of traffic rushing by, my gaze sharpening with cold intent. I would prefer if every mid-level officer in the bureau attended. After all, this scandal had a massive impact, and I want my exoneration to be witnessed by as many people as possible. I was not just after a divorce anymore. I was going to reclaim everything stolen from me. My reputation, status, and most importantly, justice. I won't let a single thing slide. The next morning, when I stepped out of the guest room, Jo Rui was still sitting on that sofa. She had not shifted an inch all night. Those two documents still sat mockingly before her. On the divorce papers, Jo Roy had finally scrawled her name. The handwriting was crooked and shaky, as if she had used up every last drop of her strength. I walked over, snatched the documents, and scrutinized them. The asset waiver was signed too. She spoke, her voice rasping like coarse sandpaper. I picked up the other document, noting her signature was accompanied by a crimson thumbprint. Perfect. I tucked the paperwork securely into my briefcase. Get your ID, your household register, and the marriage certificate ready. Meet me at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9. I did not spare her a glance. I turned on my heel, ready to leave. Zhao Yi, she called out to me from behind, stopping me in my tracks. Enan, is she really Sun Ping's daughter? I could not believe my ears. Her voice held a trace of doubt, a flicker of pathetic hope. I nearly burst out laughing. Even after hitting rock bottom, she was still clinging to her delusions. Or maybe she was desperately searching for an excuse, trying to prove she had not been playing me from the very beginning. That is a question you should ask Sun Ping. I yanked the door open and left. The sunlight outside was blindingly bright. I drove straight to the office, arriving at exactly 8:30. Most of my colleagues were just getting to their desks when they crossed paths with me in the hallway. Their expressions were a messy mix of emotions, pity, morbid curiosity, and cold distance. I ignored every single one of them, marching straight toward my office. The door was locked. I pulled out my key and turned the lock. The room was spotless, without a speck of dust. Director Zheng had not been lying to me. He really had made Xiao Li clean it every day. I sat down and turned on my computer to tackle the mountain of unread emails. Suddenly, Director Zhang's secretary knocked on the door. Section Chief Zhao, the director requests your presence in the main conference hall. I stood up, adjusting my collar with deliberate poise, and followed him out. As I pushed open the heavy conference room doors, Director John spotted me and beckoned with his hand. Come, Zhao Yi, take a seat right here. He gestured to the prestigious spot right beside him. I walked over and sat down. I could feel the weight of countless stares from behind, piercing my back like intense searchlights. In the far corner of the room, I spotted Sun Ping. His head was hung low, not daring to meet my gaze. He looked like a completely different person compared to the day I was dragged away. The meeting started without any useless small talk. Director John cut straight to the chase, beginning with a few brief remarks about the absolute necessity of discipline and integrity within our unit. Then, his tone shifted sharply. A while ago, an incident occurred inside this bureau. Our colleague, Comrade Zhao Yi, was the target of a formal whistleblowing report accusing him of serious financial misconduct. The conference hall fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. A special task force was assembled, subjecting Comrade Zhao Yi to a grueling 3-month investigation. Director Zhang's voice was stern and grave. I have gathered everyone here today to officially announce the final conclusions of that inquiry. Regarding the allegation that Comrade Zhao Yi accepted a $2 million bribe, it is a complete fabrication. This was a clear case of malicious perjury. We are here to vindicate Comrade Zhao Yi and fully restore his clean reputation. He set the documents down and turned his gaze toward me. On behalf of the Bureau, we failed to protect one of our own officers, allowing you to suffer this gross injustice. With those words, he stood up and gave me a deep, formal bow. An audible gasp rippled through the room. Director, please, this is not on you or the Bureau. I stood up instantly to support him. Director Zheng straightened up and gripped my hand firmly. You are a good man. He turned back to the stunned audience. Comrade Zhao Yi is the backbone of our operations. For 15 years, he has been a model of diligence, keeping his hands clean and his heart pure. This ordeal has caused him immense personal pain, and his family has suffered unimaginable trauma. I expect everyone in this bureau to take this as a grave warning. We must support and trust our colleagues and never be swayed by malicious rumors. The applause started thin and scattered, but quickly swelled into a deafening ovation. I felt the collective gaze of my colleagues gently shifting. Pity was being replaced by respect and admiration. At that very moment, my tarnished reputation was completely restored. Director Zheng invited me to say a few words. I stepped up to the microphone, scanning the sea of faces below until my eyes locked onto Sun Ping's deathly pale face. Our gazes locked for a split second, and he jerked his head down as if burned. I gripped the microphone, my voice ringing out with absolute clarity and poise. I am deeply grateful for the organization's trust and the leadership's unwavering support. I have done a lot of soul-searching over these past 3 months. As a veteran who has served this unit for 15 years, I have always stood by one simple truth. An upright tree fears no crooked shadow. I put my faith in this organization and believed the law would eventually grant me justice. Today, that justice has finally been served. I am fully vindicated. But there are some things that cannot simply be swept under the rug. My tone turned razor sharp and cold. Perjury and false accusations are not just personal attacks. They are a direct insult to our entire team and a blatant violation of our organizational discipline. As for the shadowy coward lurking in the dark, the one who used such despicable means to ruin a man's life, I paused for dramatic effect, my gaze cutting like a blade as it swept over Sun Ping once more. He buried his face even lower, his shoulders trembling uncontrollably. I hope the organization investigates this to the very end, showing absolute no mercy to the culprit. As I finished speaking, the conference hall erupted into a roar of applause. This time, every single clap felt genuine. Once the meeting adjourned, the chaos in my world finally came to a peaceful halt. Walking through the bureau's hallways, everyone I met made sure to greet me warmly. Welcome back, Section Chief Zhao. You have been through so much, Section Chief. Their faces wore perfectly crafted masks of concern, as if those 3 brutal months of isolation and suspicion never even happened. I acknowledged them with a blank nod, keeping my face stoic. I had barely sat at my desk and settled into my chair when my phone began to vibrate. It was an unknown number. I picked up. Zhao Yi, I am at the tea house right across from your office. We need to talk. It was Sun Peng, his voice thick with exhaustion and terror. I have absolutely nothing to say to you. No, please, I am begging you, just 10 minutes. He sounded close to tears. Fine. I hung up, stood, and made my way downstairs, taking my time. The tea house was virtually empty. Sun Peng had hidden himself in the most remote booth at the back. Seeing me, he looked like he was greeting his savior while staring straight into the eyes of the Grim Reaper. His face was a twisted mess of conflicting emotions, his tea completely untouched. I sat down, poured myself a cup, and said, Speak, Brother Yi. No, Section Chief Zhao, he babbled frantically. I heard everything you said at the meeting today. I know I messed up. I am so sorry. I truly realize my mistake now. With a heavy thud, he slid off his seat, dropping to his knees before me. I leaned back, casually distancing myself from his pathetic show. Just say what you came to say. Spare me the theatrics. The waiter stared over, looking utterly confused. Sun Peng scrambled back up in a panic and, reclaiming his seat. Chief Zhao, that incident, the formal report filed against you, it was not my idea. It was Chao Rui. It was my sister-in-law. She is the one who insisted on it. She said only if you were locked away could she be free of you. The script was repeating itself, the exact performance Chao Rui had given, shifting the blame onto her partner. I watched him in absolute silence, saying nothing. My quietness only magnified his terror. Seriously, I swear on my life. I tried to talk her out of it. I told her it was too risky and wrong, but she wouldn't listen. She was dead set on destroying you. He raised his hand, as if making a solemn vow to the heavens. Is that so? I reached into my briefcase, pulled out my smartphone, and without unlocking it, turned the screen toward him. The wallpaper was a photo I had set. It showed him and Chao Rui outside that rented apartment, locked in a passionate embrace. It was a still I captured from the video my friend provided. High definition, crystal clear. Sun Peng stared at the screen like a deer in headlights. The color drained from his face even faster than before, his lips quivering as he tried to speak, but no sound came. Do you want to see more? Maybe your private chat history, where you plotted to frame me and steal my assets, and leave your cousin-in-law to rot in prison with nothing? Sun Peng began to shake violently, heavy beads of cold sweat pouring down his forehead. Or maybe we should talk about Annan. I dropped the final, crushing blow. You really adore her, don't you? Buying her expensive toys, acting even more excited than I was the day she was born. I am dying to know, in what capacity were you caring for my daughter? Shut up, just stop. Sun Peng finally snapped, clutching his head with both hands. He let out a low, agonized groan. I am begging you, don't say another word. I put my phone away and slowly sipped my tea. It had gone ice cold. Sun Peng, we were brothers back in college. I actually believed you were my true friend, a part of my family. My voice was a whisper, yet each word struck his soul like a hammer. You burned 15 years of my memories, shattered my trust, and tried to ruin my life. Yi, I am a monster worse than a beast, he choked out. He raised his tear-covered face. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and in a low whisper meant only for our ears, I said, you have 2 paths now. 1. I hand this evidence to your superiors. Filing a false report against an official carries a heavy price. Your downfall will be 100 times more brutal than mine. 2. Before sunrise tomorrow, you must submit your formal resignation to the Bureau, then write a full confession detailing exactly how you conspired with Chao Rui. Document every single step of your treacherous plan. Write down every disgusting detail. Sign your name, and hand it to me. Once those two tasks are complete, you can get lost. Get out of this city and never show your face to me again. Choose. I leaned back. Sun Peng slumped into the booth, his face the color of cold ash. He knew he had no choice. Compared to public disgrace and rotting in a prison cell, vanishing quietly was his only lifeline. Leaving the tea house, I checked my watch. 8 a.m. 10 minutes until our appointment. I drove toward the Civil Affairs Bureau at a leisurely pace, and after parking the car, I walked to the entrance. Chao Rui was already waiting. She wore a drab gray trench coat, her hair pinned up in a messy bun. Wearing no makeup, she looked pale and completely haggard. She clutched a small canvas bag containing all our documents. When she saw me, her gaze darted away. She did not say a word. I was not in the mood for small talk either. We walked inside like two strangers, one after the other. We pulled a ticket and waited. The entire ordeal was wrapped in a heavy, dead silence. Around us, couples drifted in and out, some beaming, ready to marry, others wearing expressions of pure misery, there to divorce. Our icy silence felt eerily out of place in such a crowd. Finally, our number flashed on the screen. We walked to the counter and sat down. Are both parties here for a voluntary divorce? Yes. Is the asset division mutually agreed upon? What about custody? Everything is settled. The terms are specified in the agreement. The clerk scanned our divorce agreement with a practiced eye. She paused when she saw that the wife waived all assets and accepted sole responsibility for the child, with no support from the husband. She looked up at Chao Rui in sheer disbelief. Chao Rui buried her face deeper. The clerk did not push. It was not her place to judge. Fill these out. We both fell into a quiet trance as we wrote. I finished mine in a flash. Name, Zhao Yi. Ethnicity, Han. Under reason for divorce, I wrote just 2 words. Irreconcilable differences. I granted her that final shred of dignity. Forms filed, photos taken. When the heavy steel seal slammed onto the red certificates, Chao Rui's body recoiled at the sound. It was finally over. Done. I snatched my copy, stood up, and turned to walk away. No farewells. No parting words. Stepping out of the building, the sunlight was blinding. It felt like a 1,000-pound weight lifted from my soul. Chao Rui followed me outside. I stopped and looked back at her one last time. This was our final exchange as a couple. Can I go back to pack our things? You have exactly 2 hours. I will wait downstairs. Back at the building, I did not go up. I leaned against my car and lit a cigarette, me first in 3 months. As the smoke drifted, my mind became incredibly sharp and clear. In less than an hour, Chao Rui descended, hauling 2 massive suitcases, with NN trailing quietly by her side. The little girl gripped her mother's coat, staring up at me with terrified, swollen eyes that were red and puffy from what had clearly been hours of crying. I ground my cigarette under my heel, walked over, and held out my hand. Give me the keys. The car was in her name, but bought entirely with my hard-earned money. Our settlement made it clear it was mine. She fished them from her purse and handed them over. Where are you going? Back to my mother's. And Sun Ping? I asked. He sent me some money this morning and blocked me on everything. He said he's leaving town for good. I felt absolutely nothing. That was simply the price he had to pay. Good luck with that. I left her with those cold words, yanked the car door open, climbed in, and drove out of the residential complex. In the rearview mirror, mother and daughter shrank until they were just a blurry speck. The moment I got home, I called a locksmith. Hello, is this the master locksmith? I need to change every lock. Give me the highest security grade you have. 30 minutes later, he was at my door. Hearing the high-pitched whine of the electric drill, smelling the sharp scent of machine oil, I knew the last lingering traces of their presence were being purged. After showing him out, I stood in the center of the empty living room. Finally, this place was mine again. I shed my jacket, stepped into the study, and poured a neat whiskey. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A file transfer notification popped up. I tapped it open. It was a Word document from Sun Ping titled Confession. Opening it, I absorbed every single word. It was a meticulous log of how he lusted after my wife, realized Annan was his biological daughter, systematically seduced Ju Rai, and how they ultimately orchestrated that venomous frame-up. His words dripped with fake sincerity and pathetic regret. I finished, saved the file, and dragged it into an encrypted folder. This was my ultimate insurance policy. I carried my glass to the window, watching the city lights flicker below. 1,000 windows lit up in the twilight, traffic a bustling river, as if nothing had changed. Yet my world had been completely destroyed, only for me to rebuild it myself. I took a slow sip, the fiery liquid burning my throat with a fiery heat. I had won this war. The victory was clean, the triumph absolute. Yet, no wild euphoria filled my chest, only a vast, ocean-like stillness. The revenge was complete. Tomorrow, the sun would rise, and my new life would begin. The next morning, I woke to total silence. No more of Anan's morning tantrums, no more of Ju Rai's clattering in the kitchen, or the maid's quiet, cautious footsteps. The entire 180 square meter apartment felt like a massive, hollow echo chamber. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling for a long, long time. The suffocating tension of revenge had vanished, but there was no surge of triumphant joy. Instead, a massive emptiness settled in. It took just half a month to cut through the Gordian knot of my life, severing every rotten root of the past 15 years. Now I stood on a clean, empty ruin, free from the toxic people who once plagued me. But I had nothing left. I dragged myself out of bed to freshen up, then boiled a single bowl of plain noodles. Just a humble bowl of yang chun noodles, with a pinch of salt and soy sauce. After finishing, I washed the bowl until it shined and put it away. Then I grabbed my phone and dialed my mother's number. It rang forever before she finally answered. Hello, Yi? Mom, it's me. Are you okay? Did that meeting happen yet? They didn't give you a hard time, did they? The day I was arrested, the news had reached my parents like wildfire. They were so terrified they nearly fell ill. For 3 months, they pulled every string, pleading with everyone, but they weren't even allowed to see my face. I could only imagine the hell they endured. I'm fine, Mom. It's over now. The bureau had a meeting yesterday, and Director Zhang personally cleared my name. Thank goodness. You've suffered so much, my child. Because of your situation, your father's hair has turned half white from worry. A sharp pain of guilt twisted in my chest. Your dad is playing chess at the park. I didn't tell him you called, fearing he'd get too worked up. Mom, I have some news. I paused to organize my thoughts. Ju Rai and I got divorced yesterday. The phone went dead silent. What did you say? A divorce? But why? Is it because? But she reported you. Yi, listen to me. No grudge between husband and wife should last forever. She was probably just confused. I listened to her, silent and stalled. I didn't want to tell her that Anan wasn't my flesh and blood. Burdening them with that scandal and shock would simply be too much for them to handle. In their eyes, Anan was their only granddaughter, the absolute apple of their eye for 5 years. Telling them the truth would be too cruel. She was seeing someone behind my back. Reporting me was a trap they planned together. They wanted me locked up so they could be together. The other end of the line plunged back into dead silence. This time, I heard my mother's heavy, ragged breathing. That treacherous woman, how dare she? How did our family ever wrong her? You treated her with nothing but kindness. How could she do something so monstrous? It's over, Mom. The divorce is final, and she left with absolutely nothing. From now on, we have zero ties to them. But what about Anan? Who does Anan stay with? If she goes with her, that's unacceptable. She is a granddaughter of the family. She can't be raised by a woman like that. Mom, I have already decided. You and Dad must act as if she no longer exists. As those words left my chest, my heart felt squeezed by a violent fist. But a quick cut is better than a lingering ache. My mother went silent. She was a perceptive woman. She likely sensed my tone, a deep resolve that could not be moved. She didn't press me further. I understand, Yi. Just take care of yourself. When you feel homesick, just come back to us, okay? I will, Mom. Hanging up, I felt like I had survived another brutal battle. I sat on the sofa until the afternoon sun spilled through the window, casting a faint, warm glow on my face. That afternoon, I returned to work. Director Zhang summoned me to his office and brewed a pot of tea. Zhao Yi, have you settled your family affairs? Everything is taken care of, Director. Thank you for asking. Director Zhang nodded slowly, letting out a heavy sigh. As for Ju Rai, I attended your wedding myself. I never imagined it would end like this. And regarding Sun Ping, he resigned yesterday morning, claiming family issues required him to return home. Understood, I replied, my face a total mask. Sun Ping's written confession was locked safely in my drawer. For his sake, he had better stay gone forever. Director Zhang studied me, his eyes showing a mix of respect and approval. Zhao Yi, how fast you've recovered is truly impressive. To endure such massive injustice and still maintain this level of calm composure while handling everything, with such tactical grace. Honestly, I find it quite admirable. This whole ordeal was a disaster for you, but it served as the ultimate trial by fire. His tone shifted to a more serious note. The city is launching a major smart city initiative, requiring deep coordination across multiple departments. It is a tough nut to crack, a massive challenge. I have already recommended you to the higher-ups to lead the charge and build a specialized task force. My heart skipped a beat. This was not just another project. This was a clear signal, a clear sign that the organization was betting entirely on me. If you knock this project out of the park, it will rocket your career forward. Director Zhang gave me a look heavy with deep meaning. So, do you have the confidence to pull this off, Zhao Yi? I stood tall and gave Director Zhang a resolute nod. Count me in. Preparations for the new project were chaotic and endless. I poured all my energy into the work. Endless meetings, exhaustive research, drafting complex proposals, and mediating between friction-filled departments. I stayed at the office late every night. This relentless grind was like a potent medicine, leaving me no time to dwell on the toxic wreckage of my past. It also felt like I had finally rediscovered my true purpose. Everything was gradually falling back into place. But just as I thought I had cut ties for good, a single phone call shattered my newfound peace. It was my former mother-in-law. Seeing that number on the screen, my first instinct was to hang up immediately, but after a brief hesitation, I answered. Zhao Yi, you absolute monster. Do you have even a shred of conscience left? The second the call connected, a torrential flood of vitriol and curses crashed down. Do you have any idea how much you have ruined Zhao Rui? You divorced her and left her penniless. How could you be so cold? She bore you a daughter, she slaved away for you like a beast of burden for years, and this is how you repay her. My former mother-in-law's shrill voice pierced my eardrums, so I pulled the phone away. I listened to her rant in complete silence. Only when she ran out of breath, gasping for air, did I bring the phone back to my ear. Are you finished? You owe our family an explanation. You must compensate Zhao Rui with the apartment, the car, and half the savings. Otherwise, we will raise absolute hell at your office and expose you for abandoning your wife and child. Is that so? Are you absolutely sure you want to know the truth behind my actions? A stunned silence suddenly fell. She only reported you for your own good. She was just manipulated by others. It seems Zhao Rui hasn't been honest with you. I walked over to the window, watching the city traffic below. Let me enlighten you with two simple facts. First, your daughter and her secret lover, Sun Ping, meticulously conspired to frame me, with the sole intent of letting me rot in a prison cell so they could legally seize all my wealth. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a cold, calculated crime. Second, I paused for effect, pronouncing each word with chilling precision. Your daughter gave birth to another man's child, and let me play the fool for 5 long years. I let the weight of that truth sink in. I spent 5 years raising the granddaughter you love, only to find she doesn't share a single drop of Zhao blood. As I finished, the line fell deathly silent. I could easily picture that old woman's face right now, wondering exactly what expression she wore. Was it pure shock, burning shame, white-hot rage, or cold indifference? A full minute passed in absolute silence before a sharp clatter echoed through the speaker, the sound of her phone hitting the floor. Then, the line went dead. I stared at my dark screen, letting out a long, cathartic breath. The final lingering ghost capable of haunting my new life was finally exorcised. I opened my contacts list and found my former in-laws, and hit delete. Every single name and number associated with them was purged. From now on, our paths diverge forever. We are strangers in this vast world. That evening, I stayed in and prepared a decadent feast for myself. 4 dishes and a soup. Everything I used to crave, but Zhao Rui found too tedious to make, the meals she always refused to cook. I poured a glass of fine red wine and sat at my massive dining table, savoring every bite. The house was empty and vast, yet for the first time, I didn't feel the sting of loneliness. Instead, I felt an incredible sense of liberation. I no longer had to cater to anyone else's whims or hide my true emotions ever again. I was finally just me, living for myself. After dinner, I gave the entire apartment a deep, thorough cleaning. Every lingering trace of Zhao Rui and Annan's existence, every remnant of their lives was bagged up and tossed. The photo albums, toys, even their old clothes and shoes. As I threw the final garbage bag away and stood up straight, I felt an incredible sense of lightness. Back inside, I drew a hot bath. Soaking in the tub, I started planning a total renovation. I would tear out that gaudy, tasteless decor and replace it with the sleek, minimalist style I always wanted. I would transform Annie's old nursery into my private study and gym. As these plans swirled, a laugh actually escaped my lips. It was my first genuine smile in months. Time flew by at breakneck speed. In the blink of an eye, another month vanished. The Smart City project was moving forward flawlessly under my meticulous command. The task force I led operated with high efficiency, delivering such spectacular results that we earned several formal commendations from city officials. My standing in the bureau reached new heights. The way my colleagues looked at me shifted from pity and morbid curiosity to pure, unadulterated respect. All the whispers about my messy divorce completely died out. My career became the beating heart of my life, and I was absolutely thriving in this new reality. One afternoon, right as I finished a grueling meeting, the director's secretary summoned me. Stepping through the doors, I instantly felt a change in the room. The deputy directors were all there. Zhao Yi, take a seat. Director Zhang gestured to the chair opposite him, wearing his familiar, deeply significant grin. I had a strong hunch about what was coming, but I kept my face stoic as I sat down. Comrade Zhao Yi, we have called you here today to announce a formal organizational decision. Following a review by the party committee and city approval, it has been decided to appoint you as the deputy director of this bureau, specifically overseeing all operations and information technology development. As he finished, he led the room in applause. The other deputy directors joined in, their faces plastered with congratulatory smiles. Congratulations, deputy director at your age, truly impressive, Zhao. Even though I had anticipated this move, when the moment finally arrived, my pulse quickened with a surge of adrenaline. From a framed man on the brink of ruin, facing total career annihilation, to this in just 2 short months. My life had been a wild, high-stakes roller coaster. I am honored by the organization's trust. Thank you, esteemed leaders. I stood and gave a deep, respectful bow. No grandstanding, no over-the-top speeches, just raw, sincere gratitude. The official appointment papers were issued shortly after. My workspace was upgraded from a standard third-floor cubicle to the prestigious deputy director's suite on the 5th. The office was far more spacious and much more secluded. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, I could overlook the sprawling pulse of the entire city as the horizon widened before me. As work wrapped up that evening, my mind felt lighter. I broke my usual routine and didn't drive straight home. Instead, I just drifted through the city streets, eventually pulling over by a quiet riverside park. Stepping out of my car, I wandered along the waterfront path. The cool breeze swept across the water, bringing a crisp, misty scent that gently brushed against my skin. A cruise ship slid across the dark water, leaving a trail of glowing ripples behind. On the opposite bank, the city center rose like a forest of brightly lit, glittering skyscrapers, shining with a million lights to trace the silhouette of the skyline. I found an empty bench and sat down, absorbing the view while pieces of the past few months played in my mind like a movie. The shock of being dragged in, the crushing weight of those interrogations, my total breakdown when I saw that DNA test, and the freezing cold finality of our last fight. Then, the empty silence of the divorce that brought me here. It all felt like a twisted, hazy fever dream. But the nightmare was over. The woman I once planned to spend forever with was now a complete stranger. The little girl I thought was my own flesh and blood had disappeared into the crowd. The home we built on lies and betrayal had been torn down by my own hands and rebuilt from scratch. I had lost almost everything, yet I gained something priceless, a moment of pure, sobering clarity and a fresh start. I have no clue what lies ahead for me now, or if I will ever dare to build another family with someone new. I do not have the answers, and honestly, I do not care. All I know is, starting today, I am going to make my own life incredible. I pulled out my phone and noticed an hour-old text from my team. It was the latest draft of our technical blueprint. I opened the file and began reviewing each detail with complete focus. As the night grew colder and the river breeze picked up, I felt an unfamiliar warmth and peace. The past was finally buried. My new life was moving forward, under a sky full of stars. Working as a deputy director was nothing like my old routine. Now, I had a driver and my own secretary. The mountain of daily paperwork was never ending, and meetings ranged from local issues to citywide strategy. This constant, fast-paced hustle became my whole life. This crazy speed worked like a shield, completely cutting me off from my broken past. I truly believed my life would keep moving forward like this, swept up in my career, until my mother's voice came through the line. "Yeezy, have you been doing okay lately?" Her voice sounded cautious and hesitant. Since our last talk ended so badly, we had not spoken a word for almost a month. "I am doing great, Mom. The project is going well. How are you and Dad?" I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the sky. "We are fine," she said, but what?" She paused. "I went shopping yesterday and ran into your old neighbor. You remember Auntie Lee, the one across from Joe Rui?" My heart sank immediately. She told me Joe Rui is living in absolute misery now. After she went back to her parents, the whole truth about what she did came out. Her family feels completely disgraced. Her father has locked her inside the house, refusing to let her go out, and he screams at her whenever they cross paths. Her mother cries all day long, wondering what sins they committed to raise a daughter like that. I listened to this in silence, my face a mask of total indifference. This was the karma she deserved. But then my mother continued, saying the most heartbreaking part was Anan. The moment I heard that name, my hand gripped the phone tighter. That poor girl is constantly yelled at by her grandparents. They call her a burden and a mistake. Joe Rui is too checked out to even look after her. The poor kid has withered away, becoming a shadow of herself. She barely talks now, just holding her doll in a corner. Auntie Lee even heard her crying in her bedroom. She was asking her doll if she was a bad girl, and if that was why her daddy left. My mother started crying over the phone. "Easy," she said. "I know you hate them, but the child is innocent. She is only 5 years old. What does she know? When I think of how sweet and happy she used to be, and look at her now." "Mom." I cut her off, my voice freezing cold. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the crowd below who seemed as insignificant as tiny ants. That question, "Is it because I was bad that Daddy left?" felt like a hot needle stabbing my soul. It was a sharp, painful ache I had not felt in years. But I could not afford to be weak. I could not back down. This conversation is over. I have nothing to do with them. Whether they live or die does not concern me. Never bring them up to me again. If you still see me as your son, give me your word. On the other end of the line, there was a heavy, painful silence, followed by a tired sigh. I understand, she whispered. I hung up and stood by the window for what felt like hours, haunted by the image of Anan, her tear-stained, confused little face. I used to believe she was the greatest treasure of my life. I once held her tight, taught her to talk, and took her for walks in the park. I used to carry her on my shoulders just to hear her sweet giggles. But those happy memories have now turned into sharp, poisonous blades tearing my heart open. I closed my eyes and took a deep, heavy breath. When I opened them, my eyes had cleared, returning to my usual state of cold, unwavering resolve. I grabbed the project files off my desk, forcing myself to focus on the numbers and charts. The past is dead and buried. I refuse to let its ghost haunt me any longer. Our smart city project was moving into uncharted territory. The most vital part was the cross-department security and the integration of our citywide database. It was a technical headache and an administrative minefield. Our in-house tech team was stuck, making it crucial to hire a top-tier external partner. After several rounds of grueling bidding and strict vetting, the leading cybersecurity firm, Huanuotech, won the contract. 1 week later, the official project kickoff was held in our conference room. Their team was incredibly young and full of energy. Leading them was a project director named Su Cheng, who looked barely 30 years old, wearing a sharp, tailored black suit. Her long hair was tied back in a sleek ponytail. Her makeup was subtle, but her eyes were sharp, bright, and incredibly focused. She did not waste time on small talk. After brief introductions, she got right to business. When it was our turn to present our initial data architecture concept, my subordinate, Section Chief Lee, spoke with total confidence. She interrupted him, saying, "Sorry to stop you, Chief Lee, but your data exchange model has a massive logical flaw." The room went completely silent. Director Su, this model is based on global standards and has been through several rounds of testing. It is impossible for there to be a bug. The issue is not the model, she countered, but how you apply it. You missed the differences between our department systems as well as how permissions fade during data cleanup. With your current design, if even one piece of malicious code gets past your front-end firewall, it can exploit that security gap to spread sideways and infect the entire network in under 3 minutes, taking down 70% of our systems and causing. During the citywide data blackout, her speech was rapid fire, yet her logic stayed surgical and razor sharp. Her barrage of technical jargon and precise statistics left Section Chief Lee utterly speechless, cold sweat forming on his brow. A heavy, awkward tension filled the conference room. Every eye turned toward me, waiting to see how I, the newly appointed deputy director, would handle this blatant challenge to our authority. I watched the confident, focused woman at the whiteboard, feeling no trace of resentment or a bruised ego. Instead, a surge of genuine admiration welled up inside. I spoke up. Director Su is absolutely correct. This was indeed a critical blind spot in our planning, and experts should lead where expertise is required. We are eager to hear Hanyu Tech's superior solution. My response instantly diffused the rising tension. Su Ching glanced my way, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, clearly not expecting such humility. The rest of the session became her personal masterclass. Her proposed solution was logically airtight and brilliantly conceived, not only patching the security flaws we missed, but significantly streamlining our data processing efficiency. The meeting, originally slated to end at 5, dragged on until 7 p.m. Once the formal session wrapped up, the technical staff immediately broke into subgroups to refine the details based on the new blueprint. Su Ching and I remained in the room for a final debrief. "Director Zhao," she said, "I didn't expect you to be so open-minded in technical matters." I smiled. The most capable mind must lead. There is no point in using administrative rank to suppress the truth. "You are even more impressive than I imagined," she replied. "The feeling is mutual, to organize such a chaotic project so meticulously during the preliminary phase. Your management skills are truly admirable," she said. This was the first time our conversation shifted beyond cold business into something more personal. Right then, my stomach growled at the worst moment. "Let me order some takeout," she offered. "Is pizza all right?" "Perfect," I said, "it is on me. Consider it a small token of thanks for your support." So there we were, devouring pizza in a deserted conference room and swigging cola like college kids. We covered a massive amount of ground, talking about everything from the inevitable rise of artificial intelligence to the current bottlenecks strangling the big data industry. I realized her technical expertise was just the tip of the iceberg. Her overall vision was incredibly vast, and exchanging ideas with her was pure intellectual bliss. That night, as I lay in bed, the toxic thoughts of Chao Rui's betrayal finally ceased their constant circling. Even the memory of Anne's tears did not haunt me. Instead, my mind was occupied by a vibrant new presence and our heated debate over algorithmic ethics. It hit me right then. A fresh light had begun to pierce through my dark world. The partnership with Hanyu Tech was smoother than I ever dared hope. Su Qing's elite squad displayed a level of professionalism and grit that was simply staggering. Under her relentless leadership, the most grueling technical hurdles were demolished one by one. Our interactions naturally became more frequent, and short daily scrums quickly turned into a ritual, supplemented by deep-dive strategic reviews every single week. We pulled all-nighters together to refine blueprints and occasionally fought tooth and nail over minor technical details. She was brilliant, but a total workaholic. I would often catch her slumped in her chair after a marathon session, massaging her temples with a weary hand, exhaustion etched across her face. Yet the moment duty called, she would transform back into a high-functioning warrior. In her, I saw a rare, untainted passion I hadn't encountered in years. A raw, absolute devotion to her craft. It was magnetic, and I couldn't deny it. Still, I maintained a strict, disciplined boundary, keeping our connection purely professional. The wreckage of my failed marriage remained a jagged scar, a constant, silent warning to never hand out my trust so easily again. Especially not to another woman. One afternoon, right after lunch, my old friend Old Wang gave me a ring. He sounded absolutely buzzing, his tone laced with a hint of malicious delight. Yeezy, take a wild guess. You won't believe what juicy intel I just stumbled upon. Cut the suspense, Wang, I muttered. It is about that piece of trash, Sun Ping. A buddy of mine from back home bumped into him a couple of days ago, and you won't believe the pathetic state he is in right now. I remained silent, listening intently. That punk's little scheme with your wife had absolutely nothing to do with some grand romance. He was gambling on futures trading and ended up drowning in a massive mountain of debt, running like a rat, hiding from everyone. What he was really after was your hard-earned cash, your property, and your assets. He used his relationship with Chao Rui as a mere springboard, treating that foolish woman like a disposable pawn. All that talk about the child being his, and building a life together? It was all pure, unadulterated lies to manipulate her. His goal was to keep her loyal and obsessed just so she would help him lock you behind bars. Hearing this, I didn't feel any major shockwaves in my heart. I had already pieced together most of this sordid reality. After he packed his bags and fled from your life, didn't he slink back home to hide out? Well, he couldn't stay hidden for long before the debt collectors found him. Those guys aren't known for mercy. They broke his leg as a warning and held him captive in a seedy, rundown motel, demanding his family pay a massive ransom for his release. A family like his couldn't scrape that kind of money together, though his parents begged the creditors time and time again, nearly kneeling in the dirt. But it was all for nothing. Now here is the kicker. The most shocking part, though. You know how he finally managed to slither away? He took his own sister, a young girl who just started college, and basically sold her off to the head of those creditors as a companion. He traded his sister's entire future just to buy his own. My breathing hitched for a split second. Even a tiger doesn't devour its own cubs. I always knew Sun Ping was greedy and venomous, but I never imagined his humanity had withered to such a degree. To save his own skin, he was willing to sacrifice everything, including the happiness and dignity of his own sister. And Chao Rui fell for a monster like that, utterly demolishing our home and her own future in the process. It was profoundly pathetic and absurdly laughable. Yeezy, are you still there? My buddy just sent me a snapshot. Do you want to see it? Send it over, I replied. A moment later, my phone buzzed in my palm. I tapped the image open. The photo was captured at a chaotic, grimy train station. Sun Ping was decked out in a cheap, ragged tracksuit, one leg encased in a bulky plaster cast as he leaned heavily on a crutch. His face was a mosaic of nasty bruises, his eyes filled with sheer terror and hollow numbness. He was wedged between a crowd of migrant laborers shuffling toward a decrepit, low-budget train headed south. The man who once sat in my home, charming and suave, that scoundrel who once paraded around in tailored suits, was now reduced to a pathetic stray mutt. No, even a dog has more dignity than him. I moved our dinner venue to a spot near the office, an inconspicuous, high-end private eatery. I didn't invite the upper management, only the core members of both task forces. Director Zhao, are you trying to save our budget with this choice? Someone joked. It is not about the money, I smiled. Fancy hotels offer nothing but hollow prestige. This place offers genuine connection and flavor. Our teams have been in the trenches together for so long, we are practically family now. There is no need for that corporate theater. My words instantly ignited the atmosphere, and Hanyu Tech's young engineers finally shed their stiff reserve. Su Qing was seated right beside me. She had ditched her rigid professional suit today for a soft, cream-colored cashmere sweater. Her hair cascaded loosely over her shoulders, stripping away her sharp corporate edge and replacing it with a gentle, sophisticated grace. Director Zhao, this toast is for you, she said. You are the most unconventional client I have ever worked with. Unconventional in what way? I asked. You don't act like a boss, you act like a brother in arms. With that, she tilted her head back and downed the drink. Her tolerance for alcohol was far beyond what I expected. Halfway through the dinner, the alcohol had begun to take hold of. The conversation drifted from deadlines to our personal lives. Director Zhao, since you're so young and successful, your wife must be an absolute beauty, right? The moment those words left his mouth, the entire table froze. My secretary, Zhao Li, went pale and opened her mouth to snap, but I raised my hand to stop her. I grabbed the bottle, poured myself an overflowing glass of wine, and slowly stood up. I don't have a partner. I actually just recently finalized my divorce. The room fell dead silent. The engineer who had asked looked absolutely terrified. But it doesn't matter. It's all in the past now. With that, I downed the entire glass of wine in one defiant gulp. Su King had been watching me in complete silence the entire time. No prying curiosity in her eyes, no cheap pity either. Just a faint, tranquil wave of deep understanding. Once the dinner wrapped up and everyone parted ways, Su King was clearly feeling the wine. A soft crimson flush dusted her cheeks, making her steps slightly unsteady as she walked. Let me drive you home. No need to trouble yourself, Director Zhao. I can grab a cab. Get in the car. My tone left zero room for debate. She stared at me. She didn't argue any further, opening the door to slide into the passenger seat. The car was dead quiet, so I switched on the stereo to play some soothing instrumentals. As the music filled the space, she suddenly spoke, shattering the silence. I didn't expect such blunt questions, and my grip on the wheel tightened instinctively. Nothing special, I murmured. Just a basic personality clash. It was the most generic excuse I could offer. She turned away, staring at the passing neon lights without pressing further. My own parents, she began. Divorced while I was in college. My dad ran off with his secretary. Mom fought it forever, but eventually Thali gave up hope and moved far away. She spoke so casually, as if reciting someone else's biography, her tone as dull as discussing the weather. Since that day, I've learned one fundamental truth. And what truth is that? I asked. That people vanish, depend on others, and they will just run. Ultimately, you only have yourself. That is why I bury myself in work to build real strength. To become so formidable that I never have to rely on anyone ever again. My own life finally felt like it was turning a corner, leaving those dark memories behind. I genuinely believed they were gone, until one fateful Saturday afternoon. I had visited my parents for dinner, and afterward, my mother pulled me aside with an air of mystery. She shoved a photograph into my hands, explaining she was a civil servant and the daughter of an old friend. She begged me to meet her, but I just declined with a forced laugh. Leaving my parents' house early, I couldn't bear returning to my silent, empty apartment. Instead, I drove to the city's largest flagship bookstore, looking for some volumes on urban planning and local governance. The store was busy but preserved a peaceful, intellectual atmosphere. I lost myself in the simple joy of browsing the shelves, feeling remarkably at peace for once. Just as I walked toward the register with my heavy stack, I cut through the children's section. Suddenly, a figure both painfully familiar and strangely alien flashed into my view. It was Zhao Rui. She was crouching by a bottom shelf, searching for something. She was frighteningly gaunt, looking like nothing more than a pale shadow of her former self. Her once immaculate hair was carelessly tied back, revealing a pale, exhausted face. She wore a faded, worn-out jacket, with absolutely none of her old glamorous, high-maintenance look left. My gaze drifted past her, landing on the tiny, fragile figure sitting in silence beside her. The child was clutching a tattered doll with a broken arm, resting upon the cold floor. It was an Anne. She had withered away, her rosy cheeks replaced by a sickly, sallow complexion. Those eyes, once sparkling like brilliant dark gems, now looked as if they were veiled in thick dust, hollow and lifeless. She just sat there in eerie silence, making no sound, looking like a discarded doll forgotten by the entire world. In that moment, my heart felt squeezed by an invisible hand, crushing the air from my chest. My mother's warnings and the grim scenes Auntie Lee described all merged into a sharp blade, slicing my nerves raw. I instinctively recoiled, taking a quiet step back to hide myself behind a tall bookshelf. I watched them, gasping for air in a suddenly empty room. Zhao Rui finally found a cheap, discounted fairy tale book, stood up, and pulled Anne gently. Anne, let's go home. Her voice sounded completely drained and raspy, but the little girl did not budge at all. She simply tilted her head, staring at her mother with a blank, vacant gaze. Zhao Rui sighed heavily, and leaned down to pick her up. Right then, Anne's eyes drifted past her shoulder, peering through the gap between the bookshelves until they locked onto me. Our gazes collided, and for one brief second, the whole world ground to a halt. First came a wave of blankness, then a flicker of pure confusion, and finally a fragile, cautious glimmer of hope laced with fear. Her tiny lips trembled slightly, but no sound came out. This was the child who used to leap into my arms screaming "Daddy" with pure joy. Now, she just stared, paralyzed by a timid, painful hesitation, as if checking to see if I were just a ghost. Zhou Rui sensed her daughter's stiffness, followed her gaze, and turned her head to look. Our eyes locked. Her face instantly turned a ghostly, skeletal white. A storm of terror, shame, and utter humiliation crashed across her features like a cornered beast sensing a predator. She snatched An up in a panic, using the child's body to hide her disgraced face as she fled in a desperate, panicked retreat. Stumbling through the crowded aisles, she vanished through the exit like a ghost. I stood frozen on the spot, the heavy stack of books in my arms suddenly feeling as light as ash. My hands shook uncontrollably as my heart screamed in agony. Not for Zhou Rui, she was not worth a single shred of my emotion anymore, but entirely for that innocent, broken child. Later, Su King was at the podium reporting tech milestones, frequently looking my way for feedback, but each time I only offered a distracted grunt or a lazy up to you. My weird, uncharacteristic behavior was glaringly obvious to everyone in the room. As the meeting finally adjourned, Su King stayed behind. She set a hot cup of coffee on my desk and asked, "You are completely off your game today. Did something happen?" I took a slow, deliberate sip. It tasted incredibly bitter. "It is nothing, I just did not sleep well last night." Su King studied me with a sharp, knowing look, choosing not to call out my obvious lie. "If there is a project bottleneck, tell me. But if it is personal, I need you to refocus immediately. I need a partner who is 100% mentally present." Her words were cold and clinical, yet for some strange reason, her blunt honesty made me feel a sudden sense of relief. Forget fragile sympathy, I crave this kind of cold, rational awakening. "I understand," I replied with a sharp nod. Throughout that day, I poured every ounce of my stamina into work. I shredded through mountains of documents, resolved a three-way departmental dispute, and inspected our main server facilities. I buried myself in work to drown out my racing thoughts. But the moment everything went quiet, that haunting gaze returned with agonizing clarity. Late that night, I was still grinding away in the office, cross-referencing our final technical manifesto. A soft, rhythmic knock rattled the door, and I looked up to see Su Qing. She hadn't clocked out either. Still at it? Almost done, just the final document. She didn't say another word. She just sat directly across from me, flipped open her laptop, and silently started working on her own tasks. Neither of us said a word to disturb the other. The only sound was the rapid clicking of keyboards, a quiet companionship that finally anchored my restless heart. An hour later, I had finally cleared my desk. I slammed the laptop shut and exhaled a long, heavy breath, a release of catharsis. "Let's go, I will drop you off." On the drive back, the same soothing instrumental melody drifted through the car. As we idled at a major red light, driven by a sudden impulse, I finally spoke. "I ran into my ex-wife and her child yesterday." The moment those words escaped, my own vulnerability startled me. I thought I would carry these secrets to my grave. Su Qing turned her head, watching me in silence, with no judgment or prying. She was the ultimate patient listener. "She is doing terrible. And the child is even worse." I saw how she looked at me. I can't even finish. That agonizing cocktail of guilt, heartbreak, and powerlessness made my throat tighten into a knot. The red light flickered to green, and I accelerated, pushing the car further into the night. "You feel like you failed her, don't you?" "I honestly don't know anymore. Logically, she isn't my blood, and I didn't cause her tragedy. But emotionally, I cannot just erase 5 years of being her father." "Zhao Yi, you are not a perfect saint. You are just a man, and being human means having scars, a soft heart, and feeling the sting of pain. There is no shame in that. I used to despise my father with every fiber of my being, blaming him for destroying my home and ruining my mother. I swore I would never forgive him, until a terminal illness struck him 2 years ago. His new wife drained his accounts and vanished, leaving him completely abandoned in a hospital bed. When I went to visit him and saw how frail and withered he was, my hatred simply evaporated. I did not hate him anymore. I only felt a deep, profound pity. There are some realities we cannot change, and some people we are bound to disappoint. All we can do is accept the wreckage and keep moving toward the horizon." Her words felt like a soothing balm, smoothing the jagged edges of my soul. She was right. I cannot rewrite the past, nor can I pay for someone else's sins. All I can do is protect my own peace and forge a new path forward. I pulled up to the curb by her apartment. This time, she did not immediately unbuckle her seatbelt. A heavy silence filled the cabin. "Zhao Yi, if you really cannot walk away from that child, maybe there is something you can do." "Like what?" "I do not have all the answers, but do not act as her father. Do it as a mentor who once truly cared. For example, you could anonymously fund her education, or find some other way to improve her life. Just so she knows this harsh world has not completely abandoned her. Of course, that is just my perspective. What you do next depends entirely on your own heart." She smiled gently before stepping out. "Good night." "Good night." I watched her silhouette vanish into the building, sitting there for an eternity before starting the engine. Su Qing's words had finally opened a window in my soul. leading toward real liberation and a long overdue peace with myself. Maybe I can make a difference not for Joe Rowe, nor for that wretched, mistake-ridden past, but solely for that child, the little girl who called me daddy for 5 years. I wanted her to see some light in her dark world. I grabbed my phone and called my investigator friend, Old Wang. Old Wang, I need a favor. The call connected in the quiet dead of night. His voice was thick with sleep, but he snapped awake the moment he recognized me. Zhao Yi? It is incredibly late. Did something go wrong? No, I just need you to handle something. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the glittering skyline. My tone was calmer than it had ever been. I want to anonymously sponsor a child. The line went dead silent. Old Wang was sharp. He immediately figured out exactly who I meant. Are you absolutely sure about this? He asked with rare gravity. I am certain. I looked down at my palms. These hands had cradled her countless times, yet now they could only protect her from the shadows. I refused to let her be ruined by adult sins. I get your point, Old Wang muttered. But we cannot just hand over raw cash. Not to them. Joe Rowe's family are greedy scavengers. The moment they smell money, not a single cent will reach that girl. They will just use it to fill their own bottomless pits. That is exactly what worries me. That is why I called you. You have the connections. Help me design a foolproof strategy. Old Wang fell into a long silence. There is a way, he said. We can set up a dedicated educational trust fund managed by a top law firm. This capital will remain completely independent from that family, overseen solely by legal counsel. The only beneficiary will be the child, Zhao Anan. The money will be strictly limited to her education, healthcare, and basic living needs. This proposal was music to my ears. For example, tuition and extracurricular fees can be wired directly to the school or institutions by the firm. Medical bills will be paid based on hospital receipts. Living expenses can be labeled as a community grant, distributed through social workers or her school teachers in the form of tangible goods. Things like clothes, food, and school supplies can go directly to the child. This guarantees that every single cent is spent solely on her complete well-being. Old Wang's logic was meticulous, immediately dissolving my anxieties. This plan is perfect, I said. But her legal guardian, meaning Joe Rowe, will only have the right to be informed, with absolutely zero power to touch the money. Furthermore, make her sign an ironclad agreement. If the child suffers abuse or neglect, the trust reserves the right to challenge her custody. Call it my personal agenda. I am funding this to ensure she is cared for. If they fail, I will not hesitate to use the law to make them pay a massive price. Consider it done. We will write all of that into the agreement. Old Wang agreed without hesitation. As for the donor, we will use a shell name like the Starlight Charity Foundation. I guarantee no one will ever trace it to you. Good, let's do it. Get the lawyers on this immediately. As for the starting capital, I will wire you 5 million. Old Wang was clearly stunned. Zhao Yi, isn't that way too much? Raising a kid does not cost nearly that much. It is not too much. I stared out the window, my gaze calm and distant. I originally wanted this to be her dowry. Now, it is just a gift. This is officially the very last thing I can ever do for her. Hanging up, I felt a colossal weight lift from my chest. I cannot love her as her father anymore, but I can at least hold an umbrella over her head, making sure she is not completely helpless against life's storms. This is my liberation, and a long-awaited peace with myself. Seeking a final peace within myself, I pulled up Su Cheng's chat window. I typed 2 simple words, thank you. Almost immediately, her reply flashed across the screen with just 2 words of her own good night. Gazing at those simple characters, a soft smile crept onto my face. I realized the frozen lake in my heart was finally beginning to melt and the dark sky outside felt warmer. With that old weight lifted, a wonderful wave of relief washed over me. Even my complicated daily tasks at work suddenly felt effortless. My connection with Su Cheng grew smoother by the day, our bond deepening alongside the project's success. We began spending weekends hiking up the mountains, watching the slow clouds drift above the peaks while talking about our dreams. She wanted to lead the field of artificial intelligence, creating real innovations that could change the world forever. Personally, I wanted to protect this city and rebuild it into a safer, more efficient place that felt like a warm home. On quiet, rainy afternoons, we would often hide away in a cozy little cafe, reading our own books. Every so often, we would look up and trade a warm smile, sharing a silent, deep understanding. I realized that being with her meant I did not have to wear a mask or try too hard. We were just 2 people drawn together by true connection and unwavering respect. Today, we successfully wrapped up the first phase of our major project. To celebrate the win and unwind, Suzing suggested taking both our teams out to the countryside for a retreat. I loved the idea. We chose a beautiful resort tucked between green mountains and clear streams. During the day, we jumped into fun team activities, starting wild water fights where our work titles disappeared in the chaos. Even I, the normally serious deputy director, was completely soaked by the engineers and their water guns. I was not annoyed at all. Instead, I laughed and joined in the fun. Suzing stood nearby, watching me get completely drenched, her eyes crinkling with pure joy as she laughed. She looked absolutely glowing. That evening, we hosted a huge barbecue, gathering around a crackling bonfire with cold beers, singing our hearts out. The energy was incredibly high. Resting near the fire, I looked around at the bright, happy faces of my team, feeling a familiar warmth fill my chest. I realized life is not just about dark schemes and betrayal. Genuine happiness still exists. Su King walked over with 2 cold beers and sat beside me, handing me one. "You seem like a totally different person today," she said with a smile. "You have smiled more today than in the last 3 months." Her eyes shone brightly in the firelight. "That is because I finally found a better way to live," I replied. We fell silent again, drinking together in the cool night air, watching the flames while the team's songs echoed around us. After a while, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was a call from my mother. I walked to a quiet corner to answer. "I hope I am not interrupting," she said. "Not at all, Mom. What is going on?" "Things over at Joe Ro's place have changed. Auntie Lee told me a lawyer found Joe Ro recently. Apparently, a charity called the Starlight Foundation stepped in to support Annan. They already put her in the city's best bilingual school and even hired a child therapist to give her counseling sessions every week." I listened quietly. At first, her parents thought it was a trick to get money from them. But once they saw the foundation was paying for everything, they were thrilled. Now, they treat Annan completely differently. They are protecting her like a treasure, terrified their little golden goose might run away. The poor girl is finally looking happier. Her teachers say she is making friends and even volunteered to perform on stage. My mother sighed happily over the phone. I do not know who is behind this miracle, but as long as she is safe, that is what matters. My heart is finally at ease. "That is good to hear," I replied quietly. After hanging up, I looked at the bright stars, shining just like Annan's eyes. The last heavy weight inside my soul finally vanished. I walked back to the warm fire where Suzing waited. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked. "Yes, everything is finally settled," I replied. I looked into her eyes, seeing a bright galaxy hidden there. A sudden urge hit me to hold her close right then, but I held back. Some moments need the perfect time, and I knew that moment was coming soon. After a year of hard work, our Smart City project was finally ready for its grand launch. The city hosted a huge press conference to celebrate. As the lead director, I stood center stage under the bright spotlights, presenting to national reporters and guests. This was the result of endless hard work and tears. I saw Director Jung smiling in the crowd, and my proud colleagues beaming with pride. Right there in the front row was Su Cheng, her eyes fixed on me, shining with absolute admiration, pride, and a deep love only I could understand. The launch was a massive success. At the celebration dinner, everyone praised my leadership, and the mayor announced that I would lead the next big city expansion. I was the star of the night as applause and cheers flooded toward me like a wave. I smiled and thanked them, but my heart stayed calm. I earned this success. This was the empire I built myself after surviving a hell of betrayal. When the dinner ended, I skipped the after-parties and walked out of the hotel with Su Cheng. The cool night air cleared my mind. We skipped the car and walked side by side down the tree-lined street. "Congratulations, Director Zhao," she teased. "Or should I call you our big hero now? Congratulations to you too, CEO Su. This project would not have happened without your amazing team. Your final payment goes through tomorrow, and as for your team bonuses, I am doubling them myself." "Director Zhao, you are very generous," she laughed. We kept walking, the mood light and easy. As we reached the parking lot, a thin, weak figure jumped out from the shadows to block us. It was Zhou Rui, wearing dirty, oversized rags. Her face was ghostly pale, and her eyes stared at me with total despair and madness. Su Cheng stepped in front of me, looking alert. I patted her hand to show she was safe, then looked at Zhou Rui. "What do you want?" My voice was ice cold. "Zhao Yi," Zhou Rui whispered in a raspy voice. She glanced at Su Cheng standing next to me, her eyes flashing with jealousy, before quickly looking back at me. She begged with desperation. "Lend me some money, please." "Why?" I asked. "Because Annan is terribly sick. She needs an expensive transplant surgery. We have no money left. My parents took the settlement you gave me to pay my brother's gambling debts. Please, Zhao Yi, I am begging you, on my knees. For the 5 years we spent as husband and wife, for the 5 years Anand called you daddy, please, you have to save her. She is just an innocent child." She collapsed to her knees, wailing, but I just watched her pathetic, amateur performance without feeling a single thing. The legal overseer of the Starlight Trust sends me a detailed briefing every single week. I know for a fact that the child is healthy, thriving, and genuinely happy. Every single word out of Zhou Rui's mouth was a lie. She probably saw my rise and triumphs plastered across the news, saw a brilliant woman like Su Cheng by my side, and simply could not stomach it. She was eaten alive by jealousy, wanting to use the child as her final bargaining chip to wring one last dollar out of me. Or maybe she just wanted to ruin my new life. In my past life, I might have exploded with righteous fury, exposing her web of lies and dragging her name through the mud. But now, looking at this bitter creature, hollowed out by her own endless greed, I only found her deeply, profoundly pathetic. Joe Roy, I have made myself crystal clear. There is absolutely nothing left between us anymore. As for Anna's medical welfare, I finalized those support arrangements a long time ago. The Starlight Foundation's lead counsel, Mr. Wang, should have already delivered the medical papers to you. She is covered by a premium, lifelong health insurance policy, regardless of the illness or the cost. Every cent is fully covered by the foundation. All you do is take her to the clinic. You won't even need to sign anything. I stared into her wide, bulging eyes, and added with cold, deliberate precision, "You didn't track me down today for the child's sake. You used her as a front to extort another payout. Let me be blunt. It is never going to happen. The very second you filed those malicious, false charges, you should have realized the price. You won't ever squeeze another single cent out of me. If you care about her well-being, then shut up and use the foundation's resources to raise her with some decency. But if you dare to use her as a pawn again, or chase any more of your delusional schemes, I have 1,000 ways to strip your custody." My words were like freezing blades, cutting her final connection to her greed. She collapsed onto the pavement, her face pale as ash, unable to choke out a single syllable. I didn't give her another glance. Turning my back on the wreckage, I naturally interlaced my fingers with Su Cheng's. Her hand radiated warmth, and she squeezed back firmly, offering a reassuring smile. "Let us go home, okay?" Hand in hand, we walked beneath the city's dazzling neon lights, heading toward our car and the brand new future we would build together. Behind us, the woman who once shattered my entire world was finally swept away into the dust of history.